Lyra sat by the window, staring out at the vast alien landscape, her mind as distant as the stars. She couldn't remember a time when her life wasn't defined by her disability. A rare condition had taken away her ability to walk, leaving her bound to a wheelchair. Her father, Sarvok, the leader of an influential alien race, always reminded her of her weakness. She had been born with so much potential, but now she was just another burden. Sarvok had never been kind to her. He had tried to keep his emotions hidden, but it was clear that he saw her condition as something that tarnished the family's legacy. As an heir to a powerful family, Lyra should have been a symbol of strength, but her paralysis made her the subject of mockery. Sarvok never let her forget it. Lyra's life had always been about surviving his cold glances and sharp words. But today, something was different. She could feel the tension in the air. Her father was plotting something, and she had a feeling that it wasn't going to be good. The door to her room opened suddenly. Sarvok stepped inside, his tall figure casting a shadow over her. His cold eyes were filled with something she couldn't read, but there was a certain sense of control in his stance. "Lyra," he said, his voice low and firm. "I've made arrangements for you." Lyra looked up at him, her heart sinking. She had learned to brace herself whenever he spoke like that. "What do you mean, father?" A slight smirk tugged at the corners of Sarvok's lips. "You will be married." Lyra blinked in surprise, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Married? But I—" He interrupted her with a wave of his hand. "Yes, you. I've arranged a marriage for you. You will wed a human medic." "Why? Human?" Lyra's mind raced. Humans were seen as weak, their technology primitive compared to her people. Why would her father choose a human for her? It didn't make sense. "But father," she began, "why a human? Why would you do this to me?" Sarvok's eyes hardened. "You are a burden, Lyra. You are no longer useful to our family. I will marry you off to this human so that I can focus on what matters. The future of our family, not your condition." The words cut deep, and Lyra felt a knot form in her stomach. She had always known that her father didn't care for her the way a parent should, but hearing him say it so plainly hurt more than anything else. She had spent her life trying to live up to his expectations, but it seemed that nothing she did could ever be enough. The human medic her father had chosen. Dr. Lucas Taylor was known across the galaxy for his skills in healing alien diseases. However, he was still seen as inferior by many of her people. To Sarvok, this choice was a way to humiliate her. Marrying a human would show everyone that Lyra wasn't important enough to marry someone of her own kind, let alone an important alien. It was a cruel form of punishment disguised as an arrangement. "Your wedding will take place soon," Sarvok said, turning to leave. "I suggest you prepare yourself. You will meet him tomorrow." Lyra sat in her wheelchair, her hands trembling in her lap. She had always known that her father saw her as a disappointment, but she hadn't expected this. It wasn't just an arranged marriage, it was a way for Sarvok to show the world how little he valued her. He wanted to make sure that even her marriage was something to be ashamed of, as the door clicked shut behind him. Lyra stared out at the alien sky, feeling the weight of her father's words pressing down on her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. This marriage wasn't something she had any say in. The next day, she was introduced to Dr. Lucas Taylor, the human who was to be her husband. He entered her room quietly. Looking around as if he had never seen such advanced technology before, his eyes were warm, filled with curiosity. But there was something else there, sense of concern, as if he could already tell how uncomfortable she was with the situation. "Lyra," he asked gently. "I'm Dr. Lucas Taylor," your father informed me that I'd be providing medical care for you, and well, I wanted to meet you before we start. His voice was soft, and for the first time in a long time, Lyra felt a small sense of comfort. She had been prepared for someone cold and distant, but Lucas wasn't like that. He seemed genuinely kind, though she couldn't yet understand why. He was involved in this strange arrangement. "I don't need your pity," Lyra said, her voice shaky. "I don't need anyone's help. Not like this." Lucas stepped forward, a look of surprise crossing his face. "I'm not here to pity you," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "I'm here to help you, because that's what I do. And I believe you deserve better than what your father has arranged for you." Lyra looked at him, trying to read his expression. He wasn't mocking her. He wasn't even looking at her as if she were less than anyone else. For the first time she felt seen, but the reality of the situation settled back in. She was still trapped in an arrangement she didn't want. And it seemed like there was no way out. "Your father insists that we get married," Lucas continued. "But I don't want you to think that I'm here to force you into anything. If you don't want this, we can talk about it. I'm here for you, no matter what." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. For once, someone was treating her like she mattered. But it still didn't change the fact that her life had been chosen for her. She didn't know if she could ever escape the shadow of her father's control. As the conversation came to an end, Lyra couldn't help but feel a mixture of hope and fear. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she wondered if there could be more to life than what Sarvak had planned for her. The following morning, Lyra sat in her room, the weight of her father's words still fresh in her mind. She had been trying to prepare herself for what was about to happen. The thought of meeting Dr. Lucas Taylor, the human her father had chosen for her, made her uneasy. She had heard about humans before small. Fragile creatures compared to her own people, but she had never actually met one. Lyra couldn't understand why her father would pick someone so different. So beneath her dot, the door to her room opened, and in stepped a man who seemed almost out of place. Dr. Lucas Taylor was tall and lean, with light brown hair and eyes that shone with warmth. He wore a simple medical uniform, his hands carrying a small medical kit. His presence felt calm, almost soothing. He didn't carry the arrogance Lyra had expected from someone involved in her father's schemes. "Lyra?" His voice was soft, as if testing the air between them, careful not to startle her. "I'm Dr. Lucas Taylor. Your father asked me to come see you." Lyra nodded but said nothing. She couldn't bring herself to speak. The awkward silence hung between them like a thick fog. She had been prepared to face someone who would see her as just a patient, someone to be dealt with, but Dr. Taylor didn't look at her that way. "Your father told me about your condition," he said slowly, sitting down across from her. "But he didn't tell me much else. I thought it would be better to talk to you rather than make any assumptions." Lyra's heart raced. She had been living her life for years with the understanding that her father's word was law, that what he said went without question. But here was a man who didn't seem to care about that. His focus was entirely on her. "I don't need anyone's pity," Lyra said, finally finding her voice. "Especially not from someone like you." Lucas blinked in surprise, but didn't flinch. He kept his gaze steady. "I'm not here to pity you, Lyra. I'm here to help. That's what I do. I help people regardless of where they come from or what they've been through." Lyra bit her lip, a mixture of frustration and confusion rising within her. She had always been treated like something less because of her condition. Even her father had made it clear that she was just a burden to him. Why was this human different? Why didn't he look at her the way everyone else did? "I don't need help," she said sharply. "I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me." Lucas gave a small smile, his expression gentle. "It's not about feeling sorry for you, Lyra. I know you can take care of yourself. I just want to offer you a chance at something better." Something in his words struck a chord in her, but she wasn't ready to accept it. Not yet. She had lived her entire life in a cage. Of her father's making, he had never allowed her to have control over anything, and now he had decided that she would marry this human to further embarrass her. "I'm not some project," Lyra said, her voice shaking with anger. "I'm not something you can fix." "Don't know what it's like to be in my position." "I don't," Lucas agreed. "But that doesn't mean I won't listen. I'm here for you, Lyra, and I want to know what you need. Not what your father wants, not what anyone else expects from you. What do you want?" Lyra was silent. No one had ever asked her that before. Her father had never cared about her wants. It had always been about what was best for his image, for the family. No one had ever considered that she might want something. More something beyond the cold, emotionless world she had been forced into. The thought of it almost scared her. What if she was wrong? What if there was nothing more for her? She had always lived in the shadow of her father's expectations, and now she felt lost. Lucas didn't push. He just sat there, waiting. There was no judgment in his eyes, no impatience. He was simply giving her the space to decide for herself. And that, in itself, was something she had never experienced before. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to be a burden. Out. I don't want to be someone who just takes up space in this world. I want to matter. Lucas's expression softened. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her with understanding. He knew that what she had just shared was difficult for her, but he wasn't about to take advantage of her vulnerability. Instead, he offered a small nod. You already matter, he said quietly. You matter to me. So I'm sure there's so much more to you than what you've been told. But you're the one who gets to decide what that is. I can't give you that, Lyra, but I can support you. And I can promise that I'll never treat you as less than what you are. For a moment, Lyra felt a flicker of hope, a light in the darkness she had been trapped in for so long. She wasn't sure if she could trust him yet, but for the first time, she felt like she could breathe. Like someone was offering her a chance to stand tall, even if she could never walk again. The door clicked open then, and Sarvak's cold voice interrupted the moment. What's going on in here? Lyra's heart sank. She had hoped for a moment of peace, a chance to think things through, but her father had come to remind her of her place. Nothing, Lyra said quickly, her defenses back up, just talking. Sarvak glared at Lucas, but said nothing to him directly. His attention shifted to Lyra, his expression cold and calculating. Your wedding arrangements are being finalized. There is no more time for talking. Lyra's stomach twisted in knots. She had thought that maybe, just maybe, she had a chance at something different. But Sarvak's words reminded her of the harsh truth. She wasn't in control of her own life. As her father left, Lyra looked back at Lucas, who was still standing across from her. She wanted to say something, to ask for his help, but she didn't know how. All she could do was wait for the next move in this game her father had set into motion. But maybe, just maybe, there was hope yet. And that was something she hadn't had in a long time. Days passed, and Lyra found herself spending more and more time with Dr. Lucas Taylor. The arrangement, though still dictated by her father, was beginning to change. At first, Lyra had resisted every attempt Lucas made to connect with her, to treat her as a person instead of a patient. But over time, something shifted. She found herself looking forward to their conversations. Even if only for a few minutes, each day, Lucas would visit, bringing with him a small bag of medical supplies and a gentle smile. His concern was always clear in his eyes, but it was never pity. He asked her about her condition, but more importantly, he asked her about her life, her thoughts, her dreams. No one had ever cared to ask her about those things before. Lyra hadn't expected him to understand her. How could he? He was human, a species her people viewed as weak. But with Lucas, it didn't matter. He had never once treated her as though her disability made her less. Today, as they sat in her room, she noticed that Lucas had brought a small notebook. He didn't usually bring anything like that. She was curious, but said nothing as he sat beside her. I've been thinking, Lucas began, his voice thoughtful. I want to help you more than just with your physical condition. Lyra raised an eyebrow. How could you help me beyond that? Lucas looked down at the notebook, opening it to a page filled with notes. I've been studying your condition more closely. I think there's something we can do that might give you more control over your situation. Lyra leaned forward, a spark of interest igniting in her eyes. She had long since resigned herself to the idea that her condition was something she had to live with, something she had no control over. To hear Lucas speak like this, like there might actually be a way to improve her life, was unexpected. What do you mean? She asked, her voice quiet with hope. Well, Lucas continued, I've been researching some techniques from other planets, other cultures. I think there's a chance we could find a way to help you regain some movement. It might take time, but we could try. Lyra's heart raced. The idea that she might walk again, even just a little, seemed impossible, but she couldn't ignore the flicker of excitement that began to grow within her. It was a possibility, something she hadn't allowed herself to think about in years. Do you really think it's possible? She asked, her voice almost a Whisper, "I can't promise anything," Lucas replied, his tone serious, "but I believe it's worth trying. And I'll be with you every step of the way." "Oh, you don't have to do this alone." Lyra felt a strange sensation wash over her, part hope, part fear. The fear was easy to understand. She had been let down so many times before, but this felt different. Lucas wasn't asking for anything in return, wasn't trying to change her for his own gain. He was offering her a chance, not just for physical healing, but for a life that she could call her own. "Why are you doing this for me?" Lyra asked, genuinely curious. "I'm just some broken thing too. Everyone else." Lucas shook his head gently. "You're not broken, Lyra, not in any way that matters. I see your strength, your intelligence, your courage. You have so much more to offer than anyone has ever given you credit for." Her chest tightened at his words. It was the first time anyone had said something like that to her. Her father had always treated her as if she were nothing more than a failed heir, a disappointment. Even though she had always known she was more than that, it had been hard to believe when no one else did. But Lucas... Lucas believed in her. Before she could respond, a knock came at the door. Sarvak entered without waiting for permission, his presence as commanding as ever. The moment he stepped into the room, the atmosphere shifted, as it always did. The warmth and safety Lyra had felt with Lucas evaporated, replaced by the cold, oppressive force of her father's authority. "Enough of this nonsense." Sarvak's voice was cold and sharp. "You are wasting your time, Dr. Taylor. There is no cure for what she is. There is no point in pretending otherwise." Lyra's heart sank as she looked at her father. His words always carried weight, no matter how much she wanted to ignore them. She could see the disdain in his eyes, the judgment. She had spent so many years trying to earn his approval, but it had always felt out of reach. Now it seemed even farther than ever, but Lucas didn't flinch. He stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. "I disagree, Sarvak. I think there's more that can be done. Lyra deserves a chance." Sarvak scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "She doesn't need a chance. She needs to accept her place." Lyra clenched, her fists in her lap, the familiar frustration bubbling inside her. Her father's words were like a constant weight on her chest, a reminder that she was never good enough, never strong enough. But as she sat there listening to Lucas, something inside her shifted for the first time. She felt like there was someone in her corner, someone who saw her as she truly was. Not a disappointment, not a failure, but a person with potential. Sarvak turned to leave, his dismissal of Lucas evident in his every step. "Do what you will. But don't waste your time, human." Once he was gone, Lucas turned back to Lyra, his expression soft. "Don't let him get to you. You are not what he says you are." Lyra met his gaze, her heart full of a new kind of resolve. She didn't know what the future held, or if what Lucas was offering was even possible. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like there was something to fight for, something worth living for. "I'm ready to try," she said, her voice steady and firm. Lucas smiled. "Oh, then let's get started." The days after Lucas's promise to help her were full of uncertainty. Lyra had never dared to hope before, but something about Lucas made her believe it was possible. They started small, simple exercises, stretches, and therapies, but each session left Lyra feeling a strange mixture of hope and fear. She was afraid of failing, of trying and falling short. But she couldn't deny that something inside her felt different. The relationship between Lyra and Lucas grew stronger. They spent hours talking about life, their pasts, their hopes for the future. Lucas had shared stories of his home on Earth, how different it was from her world, how people there valued kindness and compassion. Lyra, in turn, opened up about her life under her father's strict rule, how she had always been expected to be perfect, always pressured to meet standards she could never reach. For the first time, she felt like someone was truly listening to her. But even as Lyra began to find some comfort in Lucas's presence, she could feel her father's gaze growing colder, more calculating. Sarvak had never fully approved of Lyra's attempts at independence. And now that she was starting to bond with a human, someone he saw as beneath her, he seemed to grow more distant. His behavior toward Lyra became colder, more dismissive, as if he were preparing to cut her off completely. Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. What would happen to her if her father decided she was no longer worth his time? Her future was already uncertain, but if Sarvak truly abandoned her, she would have no one left. The tension in her life seemed to escalate. There was always a sense that something was lurking in the shadows, something dangerous that she couldn't quite see. Lyra couldn't put her finger on it, but every time she looked at her father, she saw a deeper coldness in his eyes, a hidden plan unfolding that she wasn't aware of. It wasn't until one evening, when the lights in the compound dimmed unexpectedly, that the truth began to surface. Lyra was sitting in her room, practicing her exercises with Lucas, when the alarms went off. The sound was jarring, sudden, and filled the air with a sense of danger. It was the kind of sound that meant something was wrong, something big was happening. Lucas stood up quickly, his eyes wide with concern. "Stay here," he said, moving to the door. "I'll see what's going on." But Lyra wasn't the kind of person to sit idly by. She had spent her life being told what to do, but now, for the first time, she felt like she had the power to make her own decisions. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I'm coming with you." Lucas hesitated, but saw the determination in her eyes. He knew there was no stopping her once she made up her mind. He helped her into her wheelchair, and together, they rushed down the corridors toward the command center. When they arrived, they were greeted by the sight of Sarvak and a group of his closest advisors standing around a holographic map. The tension in the room was palpable. Sarvak's face was twisted in a scowl, and his voice was low and commanding as he spoke. "There has been a breach," Sarvak said, his words cold. "Rebels have infiltrated our systems. They are targeting Lyra." Lyra's heart sank at the mention of her name. She hadn't even known about the rebels, hadn't realized how close they were to the family's power. She turned to Lucas, her hands trembling. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice shaking with fear. Sarvak turned to face her, his gaze hard and calculating. "It doesn't matter who they are. They want to use you to get to me. But I won't let that happen." Lyra felt a lump form in her throat. She had always known that her father cared little for her, but now it was becoming clear that her very existence was a pawn in his political games. She had never been more certain of her place in his world. She was nothing more than a tool to be used when it suited him. Lucas stepped forward, his expression determined. "We need to protect her, Sarvak. If these rebels are targeting Lyra, they could try something drastic." Sarvak's eyes narrowed. "I don't need your advice, human. My daughter will stay here, where it's safe." Lyra felt her anger rise. "I'm not a prisoner here, Father. I won't hide away like I'm some fragile object to be locked up." Sarvak's gaze turned icy, and for a moment Lyra was sure he would lash out. But instead, he simply turned back to the map, his tone cold. "You will stay here. No one leaves the compound until this threat is eliminated." The conversation ended as quickly as it had begun, and Lyra was left with a sinking feeling in her stomach. Her father's words were final, and there was no arguing with him. But she could feel the growing sense of fear, of helplessness, deep within her. The rebels were out there, and her father was more focused on protecting his own power than on protecting her. Lucas looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. "We won't let them get to you, Lyra. We'll figure this out, together." His words were comforting, but Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much worse. There was no escaping her father's control, no escaping. The forces he had set into motion, the rebels, whoever they were, had only just begun. Later that night, as Lyra lay in bed, she couldn't help but think about the future. She had always felt like a pawn in her father's game, but now, with the rebels targeting her, she was more than ever aware of how little control she had over her own life. She thought of Lucas, of the bond they were building. She had begun to trust him, but could she trust him enough to help her break free from everything that had held her back for so long? Could he really be the one to help her escape the grip of her father's cruel control? As the night wore on, the uncertainty in her heart only grew. The future was no longer something she could ignore. It was something she had to face head on. She wasn't sure if she was strong enough to do it. But one thing was clear. Lyra wasn't going to let anyone decide her future for her. She was going to fight for herself, for her freedom, and for the life she had always dreamed of. The days that followed the discovery of the rebel threat were filled with tension. Lyra could sense the growing danger that loomed over her, and despite her father's insistence that she remain hidden away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The walls of the compound, once a place of relative safety, now felt like a prison. Her father's cold orders to remain inside were clear. But as the days passed, Lyra grew more restless. She could not remain in this cage, not while she still had the strength to fight. Lucas had been by her side, helping her with her exercises, and their bond had only deepened. But she could sense the strain in his eyes. He knew that the situation was getting worse. Lyra and Lucas had spent every moment together, even as the fear of the rebels grew. It was during one of these sessions, as they worked in the dim light of her room, that Lucas spoke the words she had been dreading to hear. "We can't stay here, Lyra," Lucas said, his voice low and serious. "The longer we stay, the more danger you'll be in. I think it's time we make a plan, a real one." Lyra turned to him, her heart racing. She had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I mean, we leave," Lucas said firmly. "We get out of here, find a place where you can be safe. We can't wait for your father to make a move. He'll never let you go, not if it means losing control over you." Lyra felt a mix of fear and excitement stir within her. The thought of leaving, of escaping her father's clutches, was a dream she had never allowed herself to entertain. She had always been told what to do, where to go, and how to live. But now, standing here with Lucas, she realized something she hadn't before. She had a choice. "Where would we go?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. "I don't know yet," Lucas replied, "but we'll figure it out, together." Lyra took a deep breath, her mind spinning with the possibilities. Could she really leave? Could she really defy her father, the most powerful figure in her world, and take control of her own life? Her father's words echoed in her mind. "You are nothing. You are a burden. You will never be anything more than a tool for my ambitions." For so long, those words had defined her. But now, with Lucas by her side, she could see that there was more to her life than the expectations placed on her. There was more than the role her father had set for her. She wasn't ready to accept it anymore. "I'm ready," Lyra said, her voice steady. "Let's do it." Lucas smiled, relief flashing across his face. "Oh, you don't know how much that means to me." But even as Lyra felt the rush of freedom, she knew it wouldn't be easy. Her father would never let her go without a fight. The rebellion that had targeted her was only the beginning. Sarvak was a powerful man, and his influence stretched far beyond the compound. But for the first time in her life, Lyra felt like she had the strength to stand up to him. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Lucas helped her gather what little she could carry. She knew that leaving would mean severing all ties. With the life she had known, it meant walking away from everything her past, her family, and the security that her father's wealth and power had provided. But with Lucas, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She wasn't running away. She was running towards something, a life of her own choosing, a chance to live without fear, without the constant weight of her father's expectations hanging over her. It wasn't until the night, before they planned to leave, that Lyra's father confronted her directly. The door to her room burst open, and Sarvak strode in, his face twisted with fury. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Lyra looked at him, her heart pounding, but her resolve was stronger than ever. "I'm leaving, father. I'm done with your control." Sarvak's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Lyra thought he might strike her, but he didn't. Instead, he seemed to calm, a calculating look replacing the anger in his expression. "You think you can escape me?" Sarvak said slowly. "You think you can walk away from everything I've given you? You'll never survive without me? You're nothing without me?" Lyra held his gaze, her heart racing, but her voice was steady. "I'm not your puppet, father. I never was, and I won't live my life in your shadow anymore." Sarvok's expression darkened, and for a brief moment Lyra saw something in his eyes, something akin to fear. It was fleeting, but it was there. Perhaps for the first time, he realized that he had lost control over her, that she was no longer the obedient daughter he could manipulate. "You won't get far," Sarvok said, his voice low. "You'll regret this." But Lyra didn't flinch. She had made her decision. She was leaving, with or without his blessing. As Sarvok turned to leave, he paused at the door, his back still to her. "Don't think I won't come after you, Lyra. I will." "I don't care anymore," she replied, her voice firm. "You don't control me." With that, Sarvok left the room, and Lyra was left with a sense of finality. She had made it. She had stood up to her father. And tomorrow, she would leave. The next morning, as the first light of dawn crept through her window, Lyra and Lucas made their escape. The compound was quiet, the guards distracted by the chaos of the rebels outside. Lucas had arranged everything, every detail of their departure. As they crossed the threshold, Lyra looked back one last time at the place that had once been her prison, but no more. She was free. Together, they stepped into the unknown, and for the first time in her life, Lyra felt like she was truly alive. The sun had barely risen when Lyra and Lucas left the compound behind. The cool morning air felt different, like a new beginning. Every step they took away from her father's world was a step toward something unknown, something they had yet to define. Lyra had no idea where they were headed, but for the first time in her life, the uncertainty felt freeing rather than terrifying. The escape had been swift, but there was no time to linger. The guards would notice soon enough, and Sarvok would not take kindly to her defiance. There was little doubt that her father would send his forces after her, determined to bring her back, to remind her that she belonged to him. But Lyra didn't care. She wasn't going back. Not this time. The thought of living under her father's control again, of being forced into a marriage she didn't want, made her feel sick. It was a life she had outgrown. It was time to make her own choices. Lucas walked beside her, always just a step away, ready to support her if she stumbled. Though the road ahead was uncertain, having him by her side gave Lyra a sense of strength she had never known before. As they reached the edge of the compound, they paused for a moment to look back. The tall walls of the estate stood behind them, dark and imposing, but now it seemed distant, almost like a memory. "This is it," Lyra said softly, taking a deep breath. "No turning back now." Lucas nodded, his eyes serious but filled with hope. "We've made it this far. We'll make it the rest of the way." With one final glance back at the life she had left behind, Lyra turned and faced forward. The path was unclear, but the future was hers to shape. They traveled for days, moving quietly, avoiding the main roads, and staying out of sight. Lucas kept a watchful eye on Lyra, making sure she didn't overexert herself. He had always been dedicated to his work, but now his focus was on her. He had become more than just her medic. He was her ally, her protector, and perhaps, in time, more than that. Though the journey was difficult, Lyra felt a strange sense of peace. Each step she took was a step away from her father's expectations, a step closer to a life where she could choose for herself. She hadn't realized how much she had been yearning for freedom, till she felt it in her bones. The world around them was vast and beautiful, but it was also dangerous. Lyra knew they couldn't stay on the move forever. They needed a place to rest, to plan their next steps. As much as she wished she could escape everything, she couldn't deny the reality of their situation. Sarvok would not give up easily. He would come after them, and he would stop at nothing to bring her back. After several days of travel, they found a small, quiet village nestled in the hills. The people there were kind, though wary of strangers. They offered Lyra and Lucas food and shelter, grateful for their company. In the quiet of the village, Lyra felt a sense of peace that she hadn't experienced in years. "We'll stay here for a while," Lucas said one evening, as they sat around a fire sharing a meal. "It's safe for now. We can think about what comes next." Lyra nodded, staring into the fire. It was hard to imagine what the future would look like. She had been so focused on escaping her father's control that she hadn't thought much about what she wanted to do with her life. But now, with Lucas beside her, she realized that she had a choice. She could build something new, something meaningful, and not just be defined by her past. In the days that followed, Lyra and Lucas worked to settle in. She helped in the village, offering what little medical knowledge she had learned from Lucas. She wasn't a trained medic, but she knew enough to help with simple injuries and illnesses. As she interacted with the villagers, she began to see that there was a life for her outside the walls of her father's estate. Her strength, once a source of weakness in her father's eyes, was now something she could use to help others. It's for the first time she felt like she was contributing to something greater than herself, something that wasn't tied to her father's ambitions. But as much as Lyra enjoyed the quiet life in the village, she knew that it couldn't last forever. Sarvak would eventually find them, and when he did, he would bring the full force of his power. It wasn't just her life that was at risk. It was Lucas's too. She couldn't let him be dragged into the mess that her father had created. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the small house they had been given, Lyra turned to Lucas with a serious expression. "We can't stay here forever. Sarvak will find us. He won't stop until he gets what he wants." Lucas looked at her, his face filled with determination. "Then we'll be ready. We'll figure out a way to fight back." Lyra shook her head. "I don't want you to risk your life for me. You've already done so much. I can't ask you to keep putting yourself in danger." "You're not asking," Lucas replied, his voice firm. "I'm here because I want to be. We're in this together, Lyra. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The sincerity in his words warmed her heart. She had never felt so supported, so cared for. She realized then that she wasn't alone anymore. The first time she felt like she had someone who truly understood her, someone who valued her for who she was, not what she could do for them. Over the next few weeks, they prepared for whatever was to come. Lyra continued to help the villagers, learning from them and offering what she could. She no longer feared her father's control over her. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. She was no longer living in his shadow. She was living for herself. The day would come when Sarvak would find them, but Lyra was no longer afraid. She was ready to face him, not as his daughter, but as someone who had the strength to make her own choices. The future was hers to shape.